Welcome back. You're back here with Carving with Eric, and I wanted to do some videos for you on my next project. I just came back from being up at the Northwest Carving Academy and had a great time up there. Take a class from Pat Moore. Yeah, you can't see it in the background. It's just right out of the camera range, but I'll show it on camera a little bit later. Had a great time connecting with some good folks, had a great time being there, had a great time learning new things. And while I'm a carver of a certain level, it's always nice to go have a class with someone you'd never taken a class with. And Pat Moore is one of those that's an excellent carver and is an excellent painter. If you ever get a chance to take her class, Pat and Randy are owners and operators of Moore Rough Outs out of North Dakota. Great class, great person to hang out with, and so much knowledge that she has. It's just amazing what she can do with the wood that she's using and the paint that she's using, because she's using nothing more than the same tools that we're using and the same kind of paints that we're using. She uses primarily Deco Art, Americana, those craft paints that we all use. Anyway, I wanted to come to you today with a video. It's been kind of chaotic here at our house for the last couple weeks. Excuse me while I scratch my nose. We wanted to remodel our parts of our house back before COVID started, and we had a budget of what we were comfortable with in terms of we've got enough in the bank plus that to cover that, so we'll use part of that, save our savings as we get a little bit older. So you never know when things are going to happen, and you need a load of cash or whatever to cover things. Transmission goes out on your car. My wife's had cancer twice, so you just never know when it's going to come back. So anyway, we were trying to do that before COVID, and the bids came in about what we thought, a little bit, about 10 or 15% higher, and then COVID hit. Nobody was doing a lot of work there. And so now that COVID is over, and the budgets came in almost 3 times what we had originally budgeted. So we've been in negotiation with our contractor, and we don't need to do that right now. We can wait on this later, and we can do this, and we can do that, and we don't need that. We can do that ourselves. Bottom line is we're going into today is the 6th week of remodeling what essentially started out as our kitchen. We had a one-butt kitchen. You could fit one person in there, and there was not a whole lot of room to pass out of there into another room. So we decided to put up new cabinets, and then we got a little realistic about it, knowing that we needed to have a decent kitchen, because if you ever have to sell your house, you wanted something. You don't want the buyers to look at it and say, well, I'm not buying it because I got to do that. Anyway, the floor in the kitchen extends over into the dining room, which extends into the front room and the family room. So we're remodeling the kitchen with new cabinets. We bought new appliances too. And all this is coming out of our savings. And we are replacing the floor in the 4 rooms that I mentioned in my office, which is the 5th room, and then all the way to the back hall, which goes to the back bedrooms, including the laundry room. And then we're doing the molding, the trim molding all around the house, except for inside the room. So not doing it inside my office, doing it inside the kitchen, living room, family room, and then we're doing it in the hallway with the doors going all the way back. So anyway, it's chaotic here, and I didn't know whether I was going to have time or the place to do a video, because a lot of our stuff is in a storage unit out on the front lawn or out on the gravel driveway that we have on the side. And a lot of it's in the garage. And if you've ever lived through a rental, you know how much a pain in the butt it is to have all your stuff outside, out in the garage. So every time I need something, I just can't find it. And I'm getting increasingly frustrated. You get very creative on your meals. Unfortunately, we've eaten more pizza than we really wanted to. And breakfast on Sunday morning with the whole family means we're going out to IHOP or something like that, because we don't have an oven. We've got a microwave, we got a toaster oven, and we got a grill. And if you've been paying attention to what's going on in Idaho right now, it's down here, it's 103, 104, 105. So grill's hot enough as it is, but when you start to stand in front of that grill and it's hot already, it can be dangerous if you're not watching what you're doing. Anyway, this video is about a fantasy door, and I've been doing these things for several years. I got several of them here. Here's one that's finished. These fantasy doors, I really enjoy doing them. They're fun, they're neat. I did this one in 2019. And so they're fun to do. I enjoy them. Here's another one in 2019. I realized everything's going to be backward. I'm filming this on my phone, but I'll switch to my regular video camera here in the next section. Here's another one. This is a 2019 one as well. Here's one that looks a little bit different. Looks almost like it looks like a ski chalet door that I saw when I was in Europe. Here's one I did in class because I've taught this several times, and sometimes I finish them and give them away or sell them or whatever. I've sold a number of these things. But anyway, here's what we're going to do. I found some ideas of ones that I saw on the internet, and there's a lot of, you type in fantasy doors or Hobbit doors, and you can see a whole lot of them, just all kinds of different ideas, and I just took a random sample of about 8 or 10. But Google, put your Google search terms in there, fantasy Hobbit door, and you'll come up with all these kinds of things. And so I realized mine is coming out after another carver by the name of Doug Linker did a video. I wanted to show you how to kick that up a notch, because what I'm going to do is we're going to have the door, the base, which I'm using out of 1-inch wood that I cut down, and so this is about not quite a 1/2 inch, because the board was 7/8, not 1 inch. It's 7/8. So we're whatever 7/8 and 1/2 is, 7/16. I don't know what it is. Anyway, that's the bottom, and then we'll have the top back up against the back edge. I've rounded the front of it in this corner, you can see. And to make it pop, I thought I was going to put like a little gnome in the front. And so I like that idea. I've not done it as a class, but I thought, there's one way to do these doors, and you can get as simple as you want, but we're going to start out with something simple, and then we're going to kick it up a notch. So here's the blank for the gnome. It's a real simple one. It is, by measurement and height, it's a little over 3 inches. By measured it in depth from the front to the back, it's right at 1 inch. And by measurement across the front, it's at 1 1/4. So 1 1/4 wide, 1 inch deep, little over, so we'll say 3 1/4 inches tall. This wood here for the fantasy door, the Hobbit door, is only, like I said, I cut it out of 1-inch wood, which really is only 7/8. I did it, it's about 5 inches tall, and it's about 4 inches wide, so 5 by 4 by 1 inch thick. The little guy is 1 inch by 1 1/4 by 3 1/4, and then the base is 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch from front to back. It's about 2 inches, and from one side to the other is about 5 1/2. I'm going to be working with Chris Willock out of the Woodcarver's Warehouse. And so Chris and I talked about using some tools and doing some videos from him. I talked to Chris Willock. There's his contact number. You can call him or you can email him, chris@woodcarverswarehouse.com, 507-339-0336. Chris Willock, and he sells Stu-By tools. He's the primary dealer here in the United States for Stu-By tools. If you're interested in Stu-By tools, I want to laminate these eventually and get them so I can just hold them up there. But anyway, StuBuyUSA.com, their number is 507-339-0336. That's how you get a hold of Chris. They sell Stu-Bys. And if you've ever used Stu-Bys, you'll find them some of the best tools you can ever use. They're very good tools out of Austria. They're made well. The handle is one of those that just fits right into your hands. Chris and I have talked about making an Eric Owens set. And basically, it would consist of 2 sizes of V-tools, 2 sizes of gouges like this, fishtail, and so those 5 tools. So 2 V-tools, 2 gouges, and a fishtail. Or I don't think they call it fishtail. I don't think Stu-By uses that terminology. They call it a wide gouge. And I'm going to use this. I'll talk about these when I get around to using them in the next section of the video. But I just wanted you to know that I'm showing off these tools, and we're going to use them to carve as much as we can. We're going to use them to carve this fantasy / Hobbit door and have a little bit of fun with it. Next section will be right up after this one, and we'll see you then. So here's what we're going to start with. Here's the door. Here's the bottom. You can see all the saw marks that we're going to have to get off that bottom, but that's okay. We could actually always turn that over. But since we're going to tool this anyway, that keeps me from having to finish the bottom as well. So I'm going to leave this here, put this here. You see that I've got a, looks like a part of a knot in there. We'll see if we can't work around that, because we're going to take that off. I'm going to stick that on the front. This will be the front. I'm going to take a marker, and I like using these little markers, these little Sharpies, extra fine, ultra fine, because you can see the mark when I make it. When I was in class this past a couple weeks ago, the instructor was like, yeah, that just makes it all muddy, and in reality it does. But if you carve fast enough, you don't have to worry about it spreading out too much. If you carve slow, now that might be a different story. Anyway, I've outlined around the edge of it just so you can see where the thing is going to go. So that way when I carve, I want to leave this here relatively flat so that it fits in there. Now we're going to glue it and possibly screw it from the bottom so that we can make it secure, so if it falls off your shelf, whatever, you don't have to worry about it getting broken or torn up or anything like that. But we're going to do that. I'm going to draw it on the back. I'm going to draw it on this side. We'll take it off the back. I said I was going to use this side because of that knot right there. I'm actually going to use, let's use that side, because if I can't negotiate that knot, then that's going to be a problem for me. So we'll play around with that and see what we're doing. Anyway, I've made this look like that, where it's rounded like that, because here's what I'm going to try to do. I want to do this one here. Trying to see which way it's sideways. And then I want to do it with kind of like this one right here. So this one has a little ring for the knob, some uber hinges, and it looks like grass. Sorry about that, I had to pause for a moment. Somebody called and started speaking some language I don't understand, so I know they're not calling just for me unless they want something. So I get a lot of those, and it was from Oregon, and I'm supposed to go teach in Oregon here in a couple months, and so I wasn't sure if one of them was calling. Anyway, regardless, well, let's try to keep our distractions to a minimum. I want to start that, like I said, I'm going to have a door. So basically the door is going to have boards running up and down the thing. It's going to have some hinges, and it's going to have some kind of knob. And if you'll see on some of these other ones that I've done, I've actually made knobs that protrude. So this was part of a dowel that I glued in there and cut the ends of them off. Don't cut them and then try to glue them or try to carve them. It's going to be hard to do. And some of them I've just painted it in. So you see the knob right there painted in. So we'll see how this project goes. I'm using Stu-By tools, as I said earlier. Call Chris at Stu-By. Chris at Woodcarver's Warehouse. Call Chris. Hope you can see that. Hang on a second. I'm new at this, so bear with me. I'm trying out some tools that Chris loaned me, and I'm using these Stu-Bys. I had a couple of my own, and I'll use a few of these Stu-Bys on this tool. I'll tell you when I'm going to do that. Let me get my glove and my protection, because I don't want to embarrass myself. It's really embarrassing when an instructor tells you what to do and then doesn't do it, and then they suffer the consequences. I've had too many times where that's happened to me or someone else. So I'm going to cover my thumb guard, as I always do, with the little rubber tips and some vet wrap around it. I have my glove here with extra protection around the fingers that are more likely to get jabbed, stabbed, or otherwise injured. And so one of the things I like to do when I start carving is to outline. So I've got two V tools here. This is the number 42, And I don't remember all those numbers, but basically it is a V-tool that looks like it's about a 45 degree, and it looks like it's about 1/4 of an inch across. These have recently been sharpened, so they should do really well. I'm going to outline my door, and what we're going to do is outline it, and then we're going to drop that plane down so that we can drop it down even further. And I'm carving away from my body, which is not my favorite thing to do. I've recently honed these Stu-By tools, and you see how well they cut. I like them, but if you know me, you know that I don't use just one tool. I have Flex Cut, I have Helvey, I have OCC, and I have Denny, not Denny, OCC, which became OCC and is now KCT. I have Drake, and I want to pause for a moment of thankfulness for the life of Gil Drake. I knew him as a person. I knew him as not as a friend, because we didn't have that much time together, but he passed away just in June, and it's a big loss to the carving community, and I was able to win a couple of his carvings that he had done up there. So pause for just a few moments to reflect on the memory of Gil Drake. Okay, pause as long as you like. You can always pause the video if you want. Having a hard time holding this at arm's length, but I'm just using that V tool to outline what I'm doing. What I mean outline, what I'm saying is I put the V right on that line, and by the time I'm done, I want to remove the line from the mark that I made. And I didn't do it at all in some spots, and I did it really well in others. Anyway, one of these days I'll make a camera and a setup that I can put right in front of my chest and carve that way. But I think I'm too ADD and too anal and too animated to do that, because I'd be all over the place, and so would this thing, and so would I. Anyway, we're outlining that so we know exactly where we want to go. Outlining it is like drawing with your tool. What it allows me to say, hey, that looks pretty good from here to here. It looks like it's a nice piece of a door that I'm going to do. And so from then, I can then come in with a knife. And I don't have a Stu-By knife, so I'm going to use one of my other tools that I got. And I want, on this one, what I want a short, and I want a stiff blade. I don't want a whole lot of flexibility, because I really want to stay right in that groove. I want to start in that groove, and I'm going to go as deep as I feel comfortable. I'm just going right in that groove. I'm straight up perpendicular from that groove. My knife is at the bottom of that groove, and it's just following that groove. I'm going to do it all the way around, because I'm going to use that as my cut line. It's basically my stop cut. So I'm in the bottom of that groove, and I'm just staying right there. If you feel more comfortable, do it any way you do. I try to always be anchored. Try to have one anchor here, one anchor here, and one anchor here. I'm not always able to do that, and so sometimes you just got to do what's comfortable, but most of all, what's safe. So if you're not comfortable and you're not safe, there are things that happen that I can guarantee you don't want to happen. Okay, I'm going to get out that fishtail, or that flat chisel that I talked about earlier. It says it's a number 3 on it. It's about, for those of you that are really interested in the length and width. You hate it when you can't find anything. I got a ruler laying here that I was using, and I'll be doggone if it's gone somewhere. There's another one. I'll use that one. This one is in inches. It is roughly about, I want to say 3/4. For my metric friends all over the world, wherever you may be watching today or some other day, it looks like it's about 10, 20 millimeters. So what I'm going to do from there, and as always when I carve, I want the grain of the wood running the length of the longest dimension. I wouldn't want the grain running this way, because this is the shortest dimension. I don't want the grain running that way. I want it running this way. And so that's going to allow me to have a chance to be able to just take off a lot of wood. That's what this tool does. And so I'm starting at the edges and I'm carving over to that stop line, stop cut that I made. And I start in the corners. I start with the outer edges. Just taking off this wood. This is what we call the hogging phase. There's no way of getting around it because you're going to have to take off that wood. And I guess you could go to the power carving and do that. I spent the last couple of days thinking I want to do some power carving and make my own roughouts. And I'm finding out that I don't really like the sound of those things. I don't really like the whole vibration. And I think whatever our brothers and sisters who provide us with roughouts do, they're well worth whatever they charge. And I think I may have to break down and start ordering roughouts. But I don't do a lot of carving outside of the local area. And when I do, then I can justify having a bunch of roughouts. They generally cost, for most carvers, depending on the size, somewhere between $15 and $25. So if you go somewhere and the instructor charges you, just know they're not making a lot of money off of that. Because they got not only $15 or $20 for the rough out, they have shipping as well. And if you know, shipping used to not be very expensive. You used to get things a lot of times free shipping. I'm not sure how Amazon does it. I'm not sure how they get away with everything being free shipping, but that's what they do. And so if you've got to pay for that, you have to order a certain many. Generally it's about 8 to 15, 8 to 12 of them, and some, I think there's one rough out person who's doing can do up to 24. But if let's say I get rough outs and I'm not doing a lot of classes every year. If I'm traveling, I'm taking them to different places. But if I'm not doing a lot of classes, it doesn't justify buying a lot of rough outs, because now you buy, let's say you buy the minimum of 8 and you go to some place and you've got, you know, four carvers that want to do that particular rough out. You're sitting there with 4 more that you hope somebody's going to do in another place. You never know. And if they don't do that, you're tied up with a lot of money, because their cost plus shipping, you can add $3 to $4 per piece of wood. Their cost for shipping and the price of the rough out brings it right around to 20 bucks. And I don't know many of you, I don't have that much spare cash just sitting around to say, hey, I'm going to put $20 per each piece of wood here, sit it on the shelf and let it sit there for 2 or 3 years. As a business owner, and I have my own small business, I want to make sure that what I spent this year I made money for, or else I'm carrying increased inventory over to the next year. And you know, that maybe that cuts into your profit margin, whatever it is. Anyway, not trying to tell you all the business woes of what's going on. Just know that for something like this, I can cut it out and I can bring it to you for a little bit of money when I sell it to you at a carving place. But if I'm doing a rough out like one of these, here's one I picked up from Ryan Olson, a good friend of mine over in Melba. It's a nice little cowboy. It's about 6 or 7 inches tall, I guess, if I had to guess. Yeah, 7 inches tall. And you know, that rough out, by the time he charges you what it costs him and makes $1 or $2 to pay for supplies and shipping water, it's 25 bucks. Some of them are a little more expensive. I won't tell you how much this one is, but this is one of Rich Weatherby's, and if you want to know what it is, it's a cowboy bust. Call him up and order it. Anyway, these things are not cheap, and there's no way they can be cheap, because you're paying somebody else to do it, and you're paying for shipping to get it to you. And I can tell you that I have 2 Dremels that I use, because I don't do a lot of power carving. It's mostly for sanding, buffing, things like that. And I have 3 Dremels. I had 2 of them, the same ones, 4300, and I have the other one that's just a smaller version. But anyway, they're not the same in terms of being as heavy duty as, say, a Fordham or a Weecheer or somebody else. And so those don't cut as well, quickly and cleanly as the others do. Anyway, I'm going to sit here for a few minutes, and I'm eventually going to start getting this down here where it needs to go. Ordinarily, you know, you take this out to the garage and you put it into a vise and you get some bigger tools out of there. But you know, I love the sound of tools being manipulated by hand through the wood, and I like the feel of it, because when I go out to the garage, and I want to do that out in the garage and not in the house, when I go out to the garage, I got a dust collector on, I've got a fan to blow any loose dust hanging around, I've got ear protection on, because when you run a wet dry vac and a fan or whatever, it's noisy. And so I'm all about protecting my hearing, because I'm in my 60s now, and I can see that part of my hearing is not as acute as it used to be. That's just nature. I mean, the amount of time you spend listening to things, especially loud things, and not protecting them, because how many of us do that when we're younger? We think, oh, it's no big deal, it's not that loud. And then we find out that later, oh yeah, it was too. I had a issue where I was near a sound that somebody turned on really, really loud. It was a deterrent for animals. And when it came on, it hurt my ears. And for hours I had a numbness in my ear that I didn't really enjoy that much. Now, and it's almost completely gone away now, but that's been a month ago. How much you want to remove this is entirely up to you. How thick do you want the outer part compared to the inner part is totally a choice on your part. It's not mine. I'm not going to tell you got to go down 3/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch or whatever. You're going to do whatever you want. This is a matter of, and you could even leave it rounded or domed if you wish. This is your choice. I'm going to take some time, and I'm going to pause the video, because really, I could sit here and talk. I mean, I'm a former school teacher, so I'm used to having to talk sometimes for quite a while to get information out. But anyway, I don't think you want to sit here and watch me carve something that you might be concentrating on rather than listening to me. So I'll pause the video. I'm just doing the same thing that I've done. I've removed some wood, and I come back in here on the edges, and I put in that V-tool, and it just cleans it up a little bit. You can clean it up later with a lot of different ways, but I'll take some time off camera to do this and lower that down. I really want to go down. I want to make that door, if I project the pieces of the lintel, I really want to go down to about right here. Can you see that very well? Let me use a marker. I really want to preserve the edges of that door frame. And then I want to bring this down to about right here. So you can see I'm removing 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/8, not quite 3/8, down, so that I have enough to put pieces and details on the wood itself for the bottom of the door, but I just want to remove that. So one of these days I'll figure out how to put that in the video where I'm just going it real fast, but that's another video down the road. Alright, I'll see you in the next section. Alright, we're back at it. I took just a few minutes to get that thing down to where I wanted it to get. Let me get it a little bit centered here. And if you can see, I've got that inside part, the actual door part, down a respectable amount of level. I'm not as low as I could be, but it's got some undulations in here, and that's okay because this is a wooden door and this is the frame. And it does not have to be perfect because these are, you know, quote unquote Hobbit doors, fantasy doors. And so they're not going to be something you buy at the lumber mill and it's completely finished. These are, you know, done by our woodland brothers and sisters. And so use it to get a little cleanup here. But anyway, I think it looks pretty good. Like I said, we're going to do a couple of them spliced together. And one of them was this one right here. I think that's the one I pointed out earlier. We're going to do that one. And we're going to add a few more features like this. So this one has grass. I like that one. But I think I want to keep it more like this. And so if we do this, I would want this on the outside or the wood. I think that's going to be a little bit hard for some of our more beginner carvers. But something like this with a knob and two hinges. Real simple. Sorry, off the camera. Keep it like this. The knob and two hinges over here. And make this just some random stones. And so I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to draw some lines here that are not necessarily all the same. Put a big one down here for the base. And then I'm going to go with some smaller ones. And then maybe a larger one, a small one, larger one, large. Make sure you're angling them up here because if these are stones, you don't want them, you want them big enough to hold their place. And you know, most of these will have a keystone right up here in the middle. So in the middle of this, right there in the middle, we'll have a keystone that kind of holds it all together. It wouldn't have that line. So we'd have some stones. Let me mark those in marker so you can see them. I always like to do them in pencil because they're easy to erase. I got the keystone at the top. Keystone is what locks it all in place. And I'm not going to be a slave to these lines, but I'm going to use them as a guide. And so what that means is that if I got a line too close or too far away, there's no perfection to this. And if I sat here and tried to make all of that perfect, I'd be here forever. I have a saying with my students, and I always tell them perfection is the enemy of completion. If I spend all this time making this perfect, then I'm going to be in trouble. I don't have a stew-by knife, so I'm using this little stiff one. It's by Pinewood Forge. And I'm going to just carve the edges off. I don't want sharp edges. These are stones, and so they don't have very many sharp edges. Make sure you know which way your grain goes, because if you get down here and you're carving the wrong way, you may carve off a big piece of that stone. But all I'm doing here, sorry, stay in the camera, dear. All I'm doing here is carving the edges of these stones off. Grain runs this way, so as you go across the top, it wants to go that way, and so it has a tendency to want to split on you and get harder and harder and harder to carve. So as you can see, I'm just trying to give it some shape to it. I'm going to do the same thing to the inside. Grain starts to change about halfway up here, so I can't keep going this way or the grain will split all the way up here. So I come up and then it starts to split. I go back down and reverse that cut 180 degrees. And it allows me to come back to it and make a fairly clean cut. Then when I get over here, I'm going across grain, so it wants to booger up on you. Get down here at the bottom, somewhere about the middle, it wants to go okay, and then it wants to split. See that big split there? I gotta change. So back down here, and now I got a little bit of character to those rocks. Put the lines back in because I liked where they were to start with, so I don't want to lose them. And I'm going to bring those all the way over to the edge this time. We'll go and do that on the outside too. Follow those lines out. Now take into consideration this is a relief carving. I'm not going to worry so much about the back of it. Yes, I am going to take a few cuts here and there because I don't want it to be completely flat out here. I want it to look like it's still rocks. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time out there on the back side of it because it's a relief carving. If you remember what I showed you earlier, here's that one that's finished. And if you round over the back just this little bit, hopefully you can see that's rounded over, not square, it sinks into the back. If I left that really flat, it will not sink into it. So this comes over, it looks like it goes over there. And when we put it to the side, it looks like it continues on over here. So we're going to do the same thing with this one. We don't want to worry about a lot of cuts back here because it doesn't matter other than just for guiding your eye in there. Okay, I'm not going to bother drawing the door. I'm still thinking about it. I know I probably want some kind of window up here, but I don't know that when I look at Hobbit things, there's none of them that have windows. Do I have to follow that like a slave? I do not. I can do whatever I want to. This is my carving. Just like yours is yours. You should carve the way you want. And don't let anybody tell you that it's not right, because in fantasy carvings like this, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going back to my V tool. Again, this is a number 41. You can download the number system off of woodcarverswarehouse.com. Go on there, look at their tools, and it shows you the profile of every tool and shows you the number, shows you the width, it shows you the angle, it shows you the profile of all of these tools. So if you're not sure what these mean or what they are, go look at them. I'm way off camera. I'm using this, it's a medium V tool. I got a smaller one over here and I have a larger one of another brand, but I'm going to use this one. And all I want to do is outline these lines again. I've got lines, let me get this back over here. I got lines all through this, and I'm going to start with the top. I want to outline it here, and then I'll come back and I'll do this side, then I'll do that side. But first thing I want to do is take off those lines. So all I'm doing is just removing that line right there. Start a little bit off to the side, and so far my V tool is holding its own. It's holding its edge. I don't feel like I've got to strop it. It's making a nice clean cut. The thing I like about these 2x, and I've never really had a whole lot of them, simply because I started with flex cut, and I love flex cut because of the flexibility of them. And for beginners, I always push them to a flex cut. But this one here I like is because right there at that handle, you can see that handle grooves kind of fit in my fingers, and I put my thumb right up here, and I tuck that thing right in the fingers. I got a lot of strength right in here. I got a lot of control right in here, and I got a lot of ability of holding that tool and sitting where I want it to go. I don't know if I've told the story, but when I was a kid, I was playing football one day with a couple of friends of mine, and I fell and broke my left wrist. And there's a bone right here at the bottom called the scaphoid bone. It anchors the thumb and the 2 rows of bones across the wrist, and I broke that. And it's typical for young kids to break that, and generally for most people it heals within 3 to 6 months. Mine never healed. So those 2 pieces of bone have been grinding together forever. It keeps me from bending my hand completely. You can't probably see that, but it doesn't bend. That was when I was 16. I did this same one when I was 19, and it still never healed. So to this day, I don't have a lot of flexibility there. I can't do push-ups like this. I have to do push-ups like martial arts on my knuckles. Or I could do it with my fingers splayed out like that to develop finger strength, but I can't bend like that. And so I was watching Chris up there at the Woodcarvers Warehouse, or up there at Northwest Carving Academy. He's doing a lot of carving like this. Well, I don't have a lot of I don't have a lot of movement from one to the other before it starts to get tired, and so I can't really do that. Anyway, so I like the way this one tucks in there, keeps it there, and I just keep it where I need it to go, and I can just come in here and cut whatever I need. Anyway, if you don't want to hear about my story of why I don't carve like other people do, then, listen. If you don't care, turn the sound off, I guess. It doesn't matter. In addition to that, as you probably know, I lost part of my middle finger. The ring finger had to be reattached, and I lost part of the thumb. It's only about half as long, and that's just the way life is. You know, you're judged by your character, and you're judged by how you handle things. And I would always tell my students, it isn't what happens to you isn't as important as how you deal with it. If you have setbacks and you cry and huddle, and there's certain, all of us to a certain degree will do that because we kind of go back into a shell to recenter ourselves. You can't stay there. It doesn't do you any good to stay in a shelter when the world around you is wanting your attention, wanting your presence, and wanting to help you. Doesn't matter who you are, there's somebody out there willing to help you. And so we need to understand that we're not in charge of what happens to us most of the times. We're in charge of how we respond to it. Okay, I'm going to do the inside. Make sure this tool is sharp. If it's not sharp, all you're going to do is break things out because it's not cutting, it's splitting. Wood grain is running this way, so as I go across grain, it will want to split out on me. So I'm going to go down into there, and I try not to smash into the door because if I do that a lot, I end up with marks that need to be cleaned up. So this is just giving me the lines between each stone. And so on this Hobbit house, and I've choked up a little bit on the tool. I don't have big hands, and so using some tools, this one isn't a big tool, it fits perfectly, but I want a little bit more control, so I choke up on it a little bit. I'm just connecting those lines from the stone all the way around to the door. Yeah, okay. To make sure I keep in the center of the frame, I've noticed when I went back on some of my videos that I wasn't in perfect alignment with where I wanted to be. In fact, one of my last videos where I showed what we were doing at the Northwest Carving Academy, my wife says, this is a good picture of the floor a lot, because I had the camera down as I was racing from one table to another, and I wasn't watching the screen, I was watching my feet. I didn't want to trip over anybody. And so I ended up with the camera pointed to the ground. If I go next year, I guarantee you I'll do better. Okay, now I want to follow that around to the outside, and I've got a longer line to go to the back of the stone. Just following my lines. I don't have to even make them straight. Maybe you make them bricks, maybe you make them round stones, maybe you make them real blocky. Maybe it's like the stones they used on the pyramid where they fit together, but they're not all necessarily 100% clones of each other. Anyway, however you do stones, or however you want to do stones, as Bob Ross says, it's your world, it's your painting, it's your carving. You do it any way you want. Whether you've got a squirrel in your pocket, or you're watching the birds outside the window, or the kids playing in a park, wherever you're carving, I hope it's a happy spot. And whatever you're doing, I hope it's a good project for you. Because this is one of those things where, if it's not fun, why are we doing it? Life should be about enjoyment. As much enjoyment as we can get out of life, let's do that. And if that means I'm going to carve a fantasy door, then that's what I'm going to do. You know what I see, mostly online, I've seen only a few of them in nature in the world. People will do these and then put them at the base of a tree for somebody else to find. You know, it's kind of like when we were kids, we painted stones, painted rocks, right? Yeah, I remember that. I'm that old. But I know some people, I see them on social media, they paint a stone and then, you know, leave it somewhere with a sign that says, take one if you want, leave one if you want. So I've got a rough shape of the door and the stones. One of the things I like to do now is I want to take a big gouge, as big a gouge as I got. Let me see if this is one that'll work. I want it to be about as wide as the stone. So what I want to do is give it some texture. So what I'm going to do on those stones is I'm going to go across the front of it, just cut. This one is stew by, it says stew by number 11. So number 11, for those of you that don't understand what the profile is, number 11 is a number 9. Number 9 does 180 degrees between this wing and this wing. Number 11 comes up and has sides. So instead of just going a half a moon, half an arc, it goes a half an arc and then keeps on going up to the sides. So that's what I'm going to do because I'm trying to get some texture and some shape to these stones. And I don't have to use just one cut. I could make 2 or 3. I could use a smaller one. I could use a big one. I could what's this? Here's a big one. Here's a two-handed tool, number 7. You can see the difference between the 7 and 11. There's a big difference between the amount of sweep. But for this one, you can see how much of the tool covers that rock. I can come in here, and I'm really going to choke up on this thing because if I'm carving like this, I have no third anchor. So I'm going to choke up, so I got an anchor, my thumb's there, and I'm going to make that stone. In fact, while I got a tool in my hand, I want to switch over to the other side and do the same thing. I heard a carver say, make every cut you can with the tool in your hand before you put it down. Why are you picking it up, put it down, picking it up, putting it down? If you're a production carver, you've got to do 40 Christmas ornaments before the winter, then why are you constantly laying down your tool, picking up another, laying down your tool, picking up another one? So I'm going to continue using this number 11 and just give every one of these rocks some kind of shape. I don't have to have much because you don't want them to look like they're perfectly cut. They've been cut out of a quarry, and somebody's taken a hammer and chisel and shaped them, which I've seen a few of those videos. It's fascinating to think those stone masons do that with the stone cutters, rather, not a mason. Masons put them in the wall, but a stone cutter, and they'll go with a really flat chisel, make a couple of pounds as they go across, and then they come on from the side and they remove that piece of stone that they wanted to remove. And I'm going, wow, that is just, it's amazing. Being a bricklayer myself, I used to be a bricklayer when I was in my days after the Air Force. I know what laying that stone looks like, and as heavy as they are, to know that somebody took chisels and a hammer and cut that by hand was just one of those things where you just go, Having told the story about having broken wrists, it's not something I would probably be doing. Okay, it's got a shape to it. Now we're going to do it across the top. I don't want to spend, 3 hours on this door frame and door, because eventually I want to get to the part where we carve the gnome. This is going to be a real simple gnome. Nothing fancy about it. Just a guy standing outside of his door with his hands on his pocket. Maybe he's waiting on his sweetheart to come home. Maybe he threw a stick for the dog to chase and he's waiting for the dog to bring it home. Who knows? Make up your own story. I think that's part of what we do when we start a project. There's a story there. I mean, there's a reason you started that project, and there's a reason why you continue with it. Make that story in your head. Let it tell you a story, and sometimes don't feel bad about changing it. Sometimes the story you start with changes. What do we call that? Plot twist. And so I've got them done around. What I want to do is come back to this big one. This is the back side, this is the side of it, and so I'm just going to go in here and take a little bit out. Try not to knock the camera over while I'm doing so. And all I'm doing is just adding characteristic to it, and it's helping me remove some of these stall marks. I don't know about you, but I don't really like them. And then when I go to paint, it really causes havoc with how much water and how much liquid or medium, if you're doing oils or whatever, water for acrylic and watercolor. It really controls how the amount of liquid it absorbs. And the more liquid it absorbs, the more pigment it sucks in there. And pretty soon you've got a really dark part of your carving that no matter what you do, it's just going to soak in more wood, more pigment. Listen to that sound. I want you to listen to that sound. God, that's an incredibly satisfying sound. I gave an interview to a local TV reporter a couple years back, and I talked about that sound, how it's falls into that family of ASMR, and I know I look it up every time and I can never remember what it means. Autonomic motor sensory response. I don't know if that's right or not. I want to go in here and clean up a little bit because I've cut through some of where I wanted to be, and I'm just making it smooth as we go. And then to finish that off, I'm going to come on the back of it, and where all these flat lines are, I just want to take a little bit off. I don't want to take off much because of some of that I've carved on. I know some of it I'm going to have to go back and clean it up, but all I'm doing is going around the back edge and giving it some of a profile. Okay, I don't know how long my battery is going to hold up, but I think we'll hold right there. What we've done is we've recessed the door into the frame, and we've given the stone some kind of profile. You can go back in here and make cut marks and do all kinds of things. You certainly want to come back here for the drawing marks. Remove that black stuff. It will show through on some of your paintings, depending on the color you're using. If you use a light gray on these stones, it probably would show up. But then again, you could tell the story that they're just stone speckles. It's a granite that has, 7 different types of minerals in it. So you see a little bit of that black. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's you crafting the story the way you want it to come out. That's the way I meant for it to come out. And if somebody doesn't like it, well, don't give it to them. Make them wait for your next thing. Sorry. All I'm doing is going here wherever I see a black mark like that one. I'm just cutting it off. I don't have to, but I know some of you will, and I'll hear about it. Somebody will say, why didn't you cut all that stuff off? It's bothering me. Well, sorry, I'm not trying to bother you. I'm trying to make you feel good about what you're doing. So anyway, I said I was going to end this segment, and I'm going to end it here in just a few seconds. Go ahead and clean up. Feel free to carve off these saw marks anywhere you see them on your piece. And I know I'll feel better about you doing that. You'll feel better about you doing that. And it'll be great. All right, see you in the next segment. Thank you.